Hi, everyone. As you all know, today we invited a fantastic artist, researcher, and educator, Professor Katie Graham. You'll meet her for the rest of the year while studying at Carleton, maybe from next semester or next year, Katie?
I teach some of the second year courses. So
Second
this
years,
next year.
great. Yeah, so she'll introduce her approaches to storytelling, specifically related to architecture, virtual heritage, immersive media, and visual communication. Also, she will introduce some of the courses she will teach. So let's welcome Professor Katie Graham. And Katie, I'm sure our students already know your profiles or bio, but could you briefly introduce yourself with your words?
Yeah, so I'm Katie Graham. So I'm an instructor here in the BMPD program, and I teach the second year courses. Currently, I'm teaching visual communication 1 and 2, as well as media writing. So just to briefly talk about the courses for next year, what you're going to expect. I'll talk only about visual communication, but my approach to that is really focused on how to tell stories through images and graphics. The first semester focuses heavily on graphic design, and the second semester focuses on photography and video. And currently it's doing all of this through a project associated with the National Arts Center at the NEC in Ottawa. But specifically, although that's the Performing Arts Center, we focus on the visual arts within it and tell stories that way. In my courses, you'll learn many different visual communication strategies and theories and apply them through technology that you'll learn through the Adobe Creative Cloud. It'll be really exciting once we meet next year. You'll get to do it all. But to talk a little bit more about myself too, I'm an instructor here, as I said, and I'm also associated with the Carleton Immersive Media Studio, which is a research lab at Carleton called SIMS. And the project that I'm going to talk to you about, the work here, has to do with research that I've done there. And so this is a research lab associated with the School of Architecture, but it's a large lab that's very multidisciplinary. It sometimes has up to 70 researchers working at one time on multiple projects. And I've been involved with them for a very long time and have led many projects that are in the digitally assisted storytelling field. And that's where really what we do here in BMPD is digitally assisted storytelling. So we were telling stories of architecture and cultural heritage through different technological programs. So I think at that, I'm going to start my presentation. Okay, so I'm presenting to you through telling stories at Carleton Immersive Media Studio that we've done, the concept of how different mediums that we use can change what the story is or how we understand the story. And before I kind of begin, I'm actually going to tell you the story of Parliament Hill. Okay, so if you don't know much about Ottawa, or if you've never been to Parliament Hill is where the capital, where the Parliament buildings right now are in Ottawa. But before Ottawa was the capital, before Ottawa was even a city, it was known as Bytown. In the early 1800s, Parliament Hill was called Barracks Hill, and it was a military base. And it was there in association with when the locks, the canal, the Ottawa Canal was built, as well as the Bytown locks. But then Ottawa became a city, so Bytown turned to Ottawa. Ottawa became the capital of what was the province of Canada, which then became Canada, the country. And the Parliament buildings were built on Parliament Hill. And so this was the East Block, the West Block, and Centre Block, the main building in the middle that had parliamentary activities. But in 1916, the Parliament buildings, the Centre Block, it burnt down. Someone within one of the reading rooms lit a cigarette, and the rest is history. The building burnt to the ground. Everything was destroyed except for the library, which was preserved by these steel doors that were shut. The building was rebuilt. So a new building was built, and with it came this large peace tower, which was kind of like the center point of the building. And then in 1967, to celebrate the 100th birthday of Canada, the Centennial Flame was built in the center of Parliament Hill. And what's really kind of interesting about this is that the Canadian Parliament grounds, the Parliament Hill, is a place to gather. There's so many things that happen there, which makes it different than some other countries' government buildings. You know, you get yoga there, you get festivals, all sorts of things. Sometimes there's pillow fights, it's weird. But this is how the building stands now. It's this large building, welcoming, and has all of the parliamentary activities in it. We have the House of Commons and the Senate within it. And within it, you can actually go for tours and see the architecture, the artwork, the furniture, and all of that. However, right now, the building is actually closed because it was in desperate need of rehabilitation. And now it's closed and people can no longer access it. The parliamentary activities have moved to other buildings and we're left with this, how do we enjoy, how do we learn about Parliament buildings? How do we replace that physical tour that used to be there? And so that story that I told you, I actually told you using examples of all of the different projects that Carleton Immersive Media Studio has used to tell that story. That same story of Parliament Hill, of the Canadian Parliament buildings, and of the need for rehabilitation, we've told many, many times in different formats with different focuses, with different mediums. And I've shown you 6 here. And what I'm going to spend the rest of the lecture on is kind of talking about how each different approach has a different focus and how the medium changes the way we tell the story. I'll just kind of quickly go over what each of those projects is. And the first one is the actual model and the documentation. So Carleton Immersive Media Studio was brought in to help with the documenting through something called point clouds and laser scanning and photogrammetry to document the buildings. So this is when you kind of take a lot of, well, you capture the reality of it. And then we created building information models, which is a form of model that keeps all of the information within it. Heritage Passages is actually a project that predates that model. And this is a project, a very early project at Carleton Immersive Media Studio. And the only project here that I actually wasn't involved in that has to do with the documenting of the locks when they were built and the history of that time in the early 1800s. Then the Senate virtual tour was in partnership with the Senate of Canada, and it's a virtual tour that uses 360 photography to bring you into the Senate and teach you about the architecture, the furniture, and the artwork within it. And so within it, you can orbit around and explore. The VR kiosk was built for Canada's 150th birthday in 2017. And so for 3 months, there was this kiosk right across the street from Parliament Hill that you could walk up to and experience one of 5 short 360 videos on a VR headset that all focus around different aspects of the Parliament buildings and the rehabilitation project. Next is Building Canada's Parliament, which is a prototype project that never came to be, unfortunately. But it was meant to be this website that every week would have a new story released that focused on a different aspect of the history of Parliament buildings, of the architecture, and of the need for rehabilitation, as well as who was involved in the rehabilitation project. And the last one is Parliament, a virtual experience. So this is a VR experience that was created in partnership with the Library of Parliament and the National Film Board, and Sims was brought in to create the model for it. And this is meant to be kind of the replacement for that physical tour to introduce the concepts of what the building is for and what the Canadian government is like the building, the spaces are about. So how these are many different projects. And as I said, they're all the same story. So how is that? And that's because there's a distinction between story and narrative of how you tell it. So the story is something that is the same. It always is exactly how it happened. It is an event that has happened in reality or in the imaginary story world that's created. And the narrative is how you tell it. And you can tell a story in many different ways, through many different perspectives. And you can focus on many different elements within it. And one thing that changes it is how you tell the story. The medium that you tell the story in will change how the story is understood. So the narrative will be modified by that medium. And I show you this clip from Wizard of Oz not just because it's fun and has colorful images, but because it is a good example of how the medium changes how you choose to tell the story. The book Wizard of Oz would not have used this imagery to tell the story. It would have used words. It would have described how wondrous this world was. But the movie that came out when movies were still being produced in black and white used the fact of color being new to film to its advantage, that the real world, so Kansas, was in black and white. And then when Dorothy landed in Oz, the world turned colorful. And without needing to say anything, it went from this black and white to colorful world and showed how wondrous it was. It used that tool to its advantage. So what does this mean? So as I said, there's two perspectives. One being the perspective, the point of view. How do you choose to tell the story? What area are you focusing on? And as the creator of the story, you get to choose that. And that's one thing that we did in all of those stories is we were like, what is the point of this story and what are we going to say? And the other one is how. If you choose to create a movie, if you choose to use words, you choose to make a virtual experience, you're going to have different tools to your advantage, and you should be specific on their use and how they tell a story, what you're going to do with them. So if we look at these 6 stories again, we can look at them with those two things in mind. What is the perspective that we chose to approach it at? What was the purpose? Why did we tell the story? And how did we tell the story? And what did the tools look at? What I'm going to do now is I'll go over once again the 6 stories. But when I get to the last one of Parliament to Virtual Experience, I'll go into more detail on that one because that's the newest one. And also it's probably the largest of the projects. So the first one, the point cloud, so the documentation and the building information model. Technically, these are not storytelling projects. These are projects that were meant to help with the renovations of the Parliament buildings and to document what the history is. However, in their creation, there is a storytelling aspect to them because as the people documenting it and as the people modeling it, you get to decide where you put the detail, what aspects are most important to model. And this is a really important storytelling technique too, because you don't just make everything even, you focus on certain elements to say this is important and draw your attention to that. So in the model, that's one of the things done, that the person building it, person modeling it, they get to decide where to spend time and say this is an important aspect to remember within the model. For Heritage Passages, this is a project that was created with many people. So Carleton had the library, the archives within the library, Hyperlab, and as well as Carleton Immersive Media Studio, and then partnered with the Bytown Museum. That's where this project came from. This project was focusing on this small period of time between 1826 and 1855 to focus on how the Bytown locks and the Rideau Canal were developed, and looking at Bytown as the city at the time and kind of what was going on with Barracks Hill. And so it did this through many different things. It had an education component. It had a lot of different archival information and images, as well as actually a mobile app to go with it. So it focused on it that way and looked at this one small time period to understand what Ottawa now a bit better. And when we look at virtual kiosk, Senate virtual tour, this project has a very narrowed focus on one side of the center block, being the Senate and the different rooms within it. And it shows it through this 360 photos and these different hotspots you can click on and then see additional information created through photographs as well as photogrammetric models that then you can see in detail. This project is really all about this self-navigation that you can explore to learn and tons of information that you can discover as you go, as well as just this focus on the importance of the building and the architecture and the artwork for what's happening within the Senate. The VR kiosk, this project came from in 2017, and it was quite successful. So it ran for a 3-month period, and about 34,000 people tried it out. So very happy with that. And that's even with the fact that one weekend they lost the keys, so couldn't open. They closed for Canada Day because that's just way too many crowd. And I think another time some of the headsets broke down. We did figure out just how many times you can view a video with one of these headsets on right next to a construction site before there are issues with the speakers. They work actually quite well. But anyway, so this project was made with the focus of creating these short little introduction of the Parliament Hill and the rehabilitation project that would be accessible to everyone. So it was about, you walked up, you picked from this menu which experience you wanted, and each provided a different perspective in about 2 minutes. You had the Peace Tower unveiled, which showed all of these spaces of the Peace Tower that you can't normally access, like behind the clock and in the bells. From yesterday to today, brought you back in time and showed you how the grounds have transformed from the early 1800s to present day. Relocation of the House of Commons and relocation of the Senate focus on how the spaces were moving from the center block to temporary other locations because of the construction project. And digitization of Parliament actually brought you into the construction and the modeling of the space and to prepare for that rehabilitation project. And this project was done by layering a lot of existing content. So we had all of this data, we had point cloud models, we had photographs, we had the building information model and even historic photos, and we layered it on top of each other to create this experience, taking advantage of the fact that most people were new to having a VR headset on, and that 360 videos would allow us to put in all of this detail in a way that would be immersive for the viewer. And then we have Building Canada's Parliament. So this project really focused on how to learn through play on a website. In it, you had all these different stories. And if we look here, so one of them, for example, would look at digital fabrication. So this is a technique that was used to help rehabilitate some of the stone sculptures in it. And so we wanted them to learn about the robot that helped with the process and understand how it worked to play with, as well as there would be videos and whatnot. And then other times it would be, once again, about that interaction, making people click and look around and self-discover on it. So here, when you want to learn about the architecture within the House of Commons space, you could do it here. And this would also show you how it was getting moved to the West Block during the temporary phase during the rehabilitation project. So you're learning about the architecture, the process, and it's all through self-discovery and clicking. And then the last one is virtual Parliament, so Parliament virtual experience. So this is the project that is really a fully immersive experience that you can experience on in VR. You can watch it, download it through Steam, or you can watch it as a 360 video on YouTube or Vimeo. And so as the Library of Parliament, in partnership with the National Film Board, brought us on to help make the model. And so this is an experience that you move around, you're brought to the 6 different spaces, and you get to be in the space while a narrator helps bring it to life and teach you about what the spaces are for and how they relate to Canada as a country. So you can see here, this is the Senate. And so this is the project I'm going to kind of talk about for the rest. And it's a project that I'm quite excited about. But just before I go into that, when we look at these 6 projects, you can see how they're very different, but they all are the same story. And that's kind of the point here, that you can tell a story in many different ways. And when you choose to tell it with a specific medium, you should use the tools of that medium to its advantage. And just to start with how do you do that? Well, it should be with a lot of play. And so to talk about the VR project, when we decided at Sims, we're going to make this model, we're like, this is easy. we have the model. We have it as a building information model. We're going to take that super detailed model of a library, plop it into Unity or Unreal, and then we'll be done. So we tried that, and then we couldn't open the application because it was too big. So we're like, okay, we have to rethink this. So we took a sliver of the library, put it in, could kind of open it. And then we're like, well, what else? This isn't really that engaging. So we started to layer in more detail. We're like, so we brought in photogrammetric models of books to see how does this work? And so as we're playing with it, we're like, okay, so by us having these small areas that are more detailed, we're drawn to them. And this is what we should do. We should think about this. When we have to reconstruct this model to be accessible within the VR experience and be able to open the program, we should consider the level of detail. And that's how we came to this. And so this model here took a lot of work. The model within the building information model that then got translated in here was more than 20 times the size that it needed to be to open. So we had a lot of reduction work and a lot of thinking about what was important. And then we did get there eventually, but it was a lot of negotiating. And to do that, we had to think, how does the model tell the story? It's not just about the overlay and the story and the narration, but the model should tell the space story too. And we can strip everything down and make it a bare minimum like we have here on the left. But that model doesn't tell a story. It's a space. We know it to be a space, but nothing draws our attention. The one on the right, however, does tell a story, and we're drawn to certain things, and we know there's elements in there that are alive. And when we look here at this model that everything's stripped down, it works, but we don't know where to put our eyes. We don't know what to look at. And here we do. We go to the paintings, we go to the ceiling, the lights, the chairs at the front. One thing we don't look at is the chairs everywhere else. Whereas in this picture, that's actually more of where my eye goes because they are one of the more detailed areas. And here they become just part of the overall space. And that's the way we figured this out, was by creating a level of detail specific for storytelling within the virtual reality. That we had a level of detail 1, which was kind of things that were stripped down and more flat. They would have a texture applied later on, but it was a generic texture. Level of detail 1.5 was still kind of a stripped down model, reduced, but it would have real life textures in it. And the level of detail 2 were when we needed to actually have something being extremely detailed and created through not modeling, but real reality capture. So creating a model out of photogrammetry and having it be very ornate. And then we would look at each space and divide it up into all of those details. And then we're like, this isn't confusing enough. So we broke it down even more. And we took level of detail 1 and we're like, let's split that into 4 different geometry levels. Because it had to be broken down to an even greater level. And when we were thinking about this, especially on the level of detail side, we thought of 3 different things: proximity, significance, and storytelling. And how this would work is that we would look and we'd be like, how close is this going to be to us? And if it was far away, we spent far less time on it. If it was close, we would spend a lot more time. And when we look at this one space, the rotunda, and we only look at the things that are level of detail 1, keep in mind that center column is level of detail 2. You can see how on the left, the things that are right close to us, even level of detail 1, were of a higher level of detail. They were much more detailed, much more interesting to look at. Whereas something far away was not. We knew you'd never get super close to this, it'd be far. We didn't care about it. We reduced it quite a bit. Then for significance, it wasn't about how close it was, but how important it was to the story. And not necessarily even just the story told, but the story of the building, the story of the space. And to kind of understand this, we can look at the doors of the House of Commons and the Senate. You stood just as close to both of them in the experience, and both of them have the exact same purpose, that they open up to the chambers. But the House of Commons door is not, it's just a wood door. It doesn't hold as much significance, so we had it as a level of detail 1. Whereas the Senate door was incredibly important. It has all of, it's very much more ornate, carved, and the handles are important, and it has the crest of each province and territory on it. So this was the most detailed element within the Senate space, even though the actual story did not talk about it. And when we're talking about significance within the library, we had the Queen Victoria statue. Now this statue, I swear I see in my dreams sometimes because we spent far too much time trying to get this right. First, it was way too detailed and took up way too much space and too much of our like amount of polygons. Then we reduced it too much and it just ruined the whole space. Then we removed it because we're like, well, we just don't want to deal with it, and that ruined the space even more. Then we brought it in, and there's certain elements in it which are more detailed than others, and lots and lots of men of power, of people power working on it to develop it. But in the end, we knew it had to be perfect because this is one of the pieces that's a center point of this space. And then we have storytelling. And so we talked about this before, but I'll bring it up again, that the variation of LODs, of level of details within it, when you have things that are higher level of detail, when you have things that are lower level of detail, help with the storytelling because it draws your attention to it. We do this when we're writing, when we're talking about something and describe something in more detail, we know it's important. When you gloss over something and say, oh, I ate breakfast today, we know breakfast wasn't important. But then when you talk about the walk to the store or walk to school and like 2 pages it takes to get through it, that's obviously an important moment of time. And the same is for the building, the same is for modeling. When you spend the time on the windows, they become important. When you spend it on the ceiling, they become important. And all of these are important to the character of the space. And the same here is for the Senate foyer. Those paintings were incredibly important, and we spent more time on them here than paintings in other spaces. So I'm not going to explain the process because it's very complicated. This is actually a simplified chart of the process, but pretty much it took a lot of people and a lot of time to work on the solutions of how can we actually take this extremely detailed model and then reduce it in a way that still holds all of the character needed for the storytelling. And the team at Sims is filled with very talented people to make this happen. And as you can see here, multiple different programs and processes, and this is even a reduction of what actually the list is like. And then we would look at each piece and even break down smaller components to two different levels within that. And the result is quite incredible. So I'm just going to show you the model and how it is in the VR experience. So you start within the rotunda. This is the main entrance of Parliament Hill of Center Block. And in it, then all of a sudden, the carvings on the walls come to life, and because each of them symbolize part of Canada. You're brought to the House of Commons foyer, which then is brought to life by a media scrum. You're transported to the House of Commons chamber, which then has a lively debate that starts. You're transported to the library, which in this space, you're moved around and you can see kind of how everything comes to life and how the books and the history within it. While we're on this slide, I'm just going to draw attention to that amazing floor, which took a lot of work. And then you're brought to the Senate foyer, where the paintings and what they represent is explained. Then lastly, you're brought to the Senate chamber, which once again is brought to life. And then at the end, you're brought up through the Peace Tower. But I'm going to end on this slide. And once it kind of repeat what I just said about this is an amazing floor. And I end on this slide because I think it really expresses kind of the advantage of using digital technology for storytelling. This slide, this image is from a perspective that you will never see the library from. This is way up high looking down. It's not somewhere that you can really get to. And the other thing is you can see the whole floor. And normally that floor is covered by carpets. and you never get to experience it. When we showed this to the people who work at the Library of Parliament, they were blown away. They knew their floor was amazing, but they'd never seen it like this. And I mean, really, you just want to start ripping up the carpet there, but then you'll ruin the floor. So it's just an incredible way to end, because it shows just how impressive the model is at showing different perspectives and different points of view that you wouldn't get from other storytelling techniques. I'm going to end that. If you want to learn more about Sims, you can go to the Sims social media. And same, you all know about BMPD, but it's always fun things on the BMPD social media. So thank you.
Awesome, Katie. It was amazing, fascinating talk, and then I was very surprised of the scales of the productions. So you sort of like produce and manage all the production process, right?
So in those projects, I'm trying to think, Heritage Passages, I had nothing to do with. I just was working on a different project in the lab at the time. I mean, that project is, I don't even think I was married, so I think it was before 2010. It's long, like, I mean, the website's broken. And all the other projects, I was the lead for. The modeling, the building information model, I stopped being the lead for and gave it up to someone else because I went on maternity leave. And then when I came back, I took over, I did other projects. But yeah, so big involvement in the projects.
Yeah, seriously. So because like it makes me think about your approach to that sort of virtual heritage and virtual storytelling, because our students already learned about VR storytelling from my perspective. Because my background is very cinematic and very narrative oriented and character like event or all sort of like happening, but because of like your approach is more architectural and space and visual oriented. So could you explain more about how your like architecture background influenced to tell the story using digital media?
Yeah, so, and I mean, it's a really interesting thing to bring up, because the difference between storytelling that some people are doing within the program and yourself and Steffi, Professor McKnight and Professor MacArthur, it's all different. So the focus for, I guess, the type of storytelling I do, as well as what Carleton Immersive Media Studio does, is that we're focused on the stories of space and place, and how stories exist within a place. So it's much more about how artifacts tell stories and how a place can become kind of like the archive for things that have happened in it. And I mean, yes, I did lead these projects, as I said, but I think I want to just really emphasize that these projects are created by many people coming together and working well as a team, and each person bringing something to it and coming up with the solutions to the challenges, because they are research projects. They do have finished, polished products at the end, but each one has a challenge that we all face, and that's what's really great about the people involved here, is that they love to solve the problems.
That's awesome. And I think students might be curious about how can I make this after graduating BMPD, or do I learn? Maybe. But do you think if they want to do this kind of projects, I'm pretty sure, like, because this kind of project is so big, they can't do everything. But what they should learn, like, to do this kind of project, and do you teach for that? Yeah.
So all of these projects had a multidisciplinary group of people working on it. For example, the Senate virtual tour had someone from, I think public history is a degree. So we had a historian working on it to help develop the stories and work along with that. There's also people from the IND program, people from architecture, people from BMPD have worked on some projects at Sims as well. And then there's engineering and all sorts of different programs. And so not one person could probably do all of it, but the skills that are learned in BMPD can help contribute to these storytelling techniques. One for the style, how to visualize things, and then one, how does technology tell stories? And then the most important thing that I think is in this program and in other programs is teaching how to learn new technologies. So, we're teaching you about how to storytell with augmented reality, virtuality, web, video, like everything. But what's going to be around in 10 years? We're not teaching you that because we don't know it either. But by showing you all of these other ways of looking at technology, we're preparing you for what will come, so then you can ask the questions and figure out how to use that for storytelling. So can everyone who graduates from this program do what's here? I believe that if you have the ambition to learn the tools that it takes for this, you've learned tools similar that you'll be able to develop these. But the main thing is focus on what storytelling techniques you're interested in, because they can contribute to stories like this.
That's awesome. That's very insightful answer. And I was really amazed about when you talk about the differences between story and narrative elements. And I can see like you mainly talk about point of view and how we can use the technology, because sometimes a lot of people overlooked about that aspect of using the technologies when we talk about narrative structure, narrative elements, but the way we approach certain technology and even all kind of details, how we see things, that's very important. That's actually changed all the narrative structure and make the good story or not good story. So I really appreciated your insightful knowledge and contribution. And one last question is, do you have any expectation from the BMPD students? And also, like, because I can see your teaching is very related to visual aspect, so specifically related on that. If there are any expectation, if they want them to prepare before they meet you, all that, yeah.
I mean, at the point that when you come to my courses in second year, I'm not necessarily expecting you to know anything that I'm going to be teaching you, because I will be aiming to help you get there. So there's not necessarily any way to prepare for that, but I would say the best thing to do is just to start to look around at design. So next time you go to a website, think about, why did you stay on that website, or why did you leave it quickly? Next time you're watching a YouTube video and you get bored after like 30 seconds and switch to another one, why? And then same with when you're playing a game, or when you're navigating an app and you can't figure out where to go. If you start asking yourself why, that's going to help when you come to my program, because then I will show you why. So
yeah, that's exciting. And also you're teaching writing courses, right? The media writing?
Yeah, so this year I'm teaching the media writing, which is also in second year. And so that one focuses on helping to improve writing skills. And it actually takes a lot of this idea of perspective and style and genre. So, telling a story differently depending on what the purpose of it is for, as well as providing different perspectives. So like focusing on the same story by looking at a person, by looking at a time, by looking at an opinion, and developing a larger narrative for that story.
That's awesome, because I found that a lot of first year students has been having a difficulty to write an essay, and what kind of styles, how we should write about it. But we don't have a particular writing courses in general and courses and for the first year. So I think taking your courses and learning more about the writing thing, specifically for the media, will be very important. So yeah, they're gonna learn that things too. So your contribution is really huge. And I let you guys know also Katie won a teaching award in cartoons. So you're gonna meet amazing professor from next year. There are gonna be a lot of exciting things happening. You're gonna use Adobe and graphic design and video editing and all kind of language for visual communication. So you can be excited. I know you guys are stuck in at home and during the COVID situation, but exciting things are gonna come up for you. So thank you so much for Katie for your time. Do you want to say anything before wrapping up?
I think just what I'll wrap up is just saying, I think this program is one where maybe at the beginning you feel overwhelmed and lost because there's so much that you're learning. But the main thing about this program is that every student that I've seen go through it so far, and I know no one's technically finished yet, so just gone through partway so far, has figured out what they want out of the program and kind of taken the information and used it differently. So this is an amazing program. And when you ask, like, what do I expect from the students? In the end, I don't know, because every single time we get to a point where I'd say this is what you should be developing at the end, I'm wowed by the creativity and the different direction that people take it. So I hope everyone's enjoying the program, and just remember, it's up to you to decide where you want to take your storytelling careers. So
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Katie, for your time. And I'll also upload your video on SNS channel, BNP SNS channel, and then let them ask you questions. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.